Hello, and welcome to Breaking News on Channel 7 Now. For today's newscast, we're going to discuss something a little bit different. We're going to review the book Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. We have our newscasters and various interviews with others to show you. So come join us and stay a while. And first off, we're going to discuss empathy and agility with our Toya Rollins reporting. She actually was interviewed with Oprah about the book by Simon Sinek, Leaders Eat Last.
Hi, Oprah. I can't tell you how honored it is for me to be here with you today to talk to you about leadership and this great book, Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. A great story that Simon depicts in this book is related to empathy, and it's about a pilot, Johnny Bravo, who flew in the US Army in 2002 during the Afghanistan war fights. He was flying high above the clouds on an August evening, and again, above the clouds, didn't have any visibility to the troops that were on the ground. All he had was a radio where he could hear whether or not the troops were in trouble, where their next post was going to be, what the need was. So flying high above the clouds, waiting to hear something on the radio, that's enough stress in and of itself, but he got that call or heard that cry that the troops were in trouble. So he immediately had to make a decision to fly below the clouds. Again, not knowing what he would be encountering once he did that. So he flew quickly below the clouds to respond to the need of the troops because he heard the angst in their voices that it was critical. Once under the clouds, he realized that he was in a valley. And during that time, the fighter jets were not equipped with any tools or any computers that would assess how quickly or how much time the pilot had to avoid colliding into a mountainside. So it was up to Johnny Bravo to quickly calculate in his head how much time he had to fire at the enemy to protect his troops, and then return to safety himself by quickly routing the fighter jet back above the clouds. So that's what he did. And once back above the clouds, the only way he knew that his plan was successful was hearing the troops back on the radio. So he waited and he waited, and then he heard, do it again, do it again. And so he did that. And the story goes that he continued to do that 2 to 3 times and was able to save a group of 21 men and women. Again, he had no visibility. He was above the clouds. And Oprah, that's an extreme example of leadership and how leaders should take the time to know their teams and understand when there is a need for them. But it applies to everyday business. It's important to say to leaders that you have to take time to fly below the clouds so that you know what the need is of your team. And if you do that, you take the time to get to know your team or know when there is a need for you to step up and lead or to help in a crisis, then you're going to build a culture of employees that want to do their best and want to do everything they have in their power to be a strong team member to that leader that they're following. Again, such an honor to be with you, Oprah. I just can't tell you how much I adore you.
Thank you, Toya. And now we move on to our other newscaster, Divya Raman, who will discuss the circle of trust and innovation. Divya?
Hi, everyone. This is Divya Raman. You're going to hear from me about 2 hot topics from the book Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. What are our 2 hot topics for today? Trust and innovation. What does trust mean? Trust is the firm belief in the reliability, truth, and ability of someone or something. And what does circle of trust mean? It is the close circle or connection of people whom we trust and who trust us and reciprocate that trust. Now, what is trust circle of trust in an organization. It is the implicit group of connection of people within an organization that makes us feel that we are protected from all external threats. Circle of trust inside organizations are built on mutual respect, creating a deep, meaningful connection and allows us to operate without fear within a protected circle. Now, great leaders help foster a circle of trust within an organization. Now, circle of trust allows us to work collaboratively, empowers and builds confidence, and also promotes innovation. The strength of a group is dependent on the strength of the circle of trust created within an organization that helps us rise together as one unified team against all odds and threats and survive and flourish against any challenge from the outside. And that is why it's very important that great leaders pay attention and focus in building a culture that's based around a circle of trust. Now, that leads us to another interesting topic for today, which is on innovation. What comes to your mind when you hear the word innovation? Light bulbs, Edison, new ideas? Yes, all of them are right. Innovation is the ability to do things differently or try doing new things, like building a new product, building a new offering, a new service, or just a better way of doing something that was done in a different way, being thought out of the box. Simon Sinek uses the example of an organization called 3M, founded by William McKnight, to drive home the point of how innovative leaders create an irreversible change to leave our world at a better place than before. William McKnight is credited to being a visionary on people and innovation. He believed in hiring the right people and leaving them alone to do their best work. He also believed that destructive criticism destroys initiative. He's credited to be the pioneer of the 15% culture, which is even now followed at 3M, which dedicates about 15% of work time for all its employees to proactively cultivate and pursue their innovative ideas that excites them at work. Innovation fosters the ability to bring your best self to work and instilling the confidence and empowerment within each of us that we are capable of leaving the world at a better place than how we found it. So let's try to be innovative leaders and leave the world a better place than what it is today. Thank you.
Today, in the health in our bodies part of the newscast, we'll be talking about the body chemicals frequently recalled throughout Simon Sinek's book. There are three overall categories. First, the selfish chemicals. Second, the selfless chemicals. And third, the stress chemical. Now let's start with the first group, the selfish chemicals. These chemicals include endorphins and dopamine. They motivate us as individuals to persevere, to get things done, to invent things. Endorphins are a short-lasting chemical that specifically mask physical pain. They give us the energy, boost strength for our fight or flight response. Think of that person lifting a car to get help to help a child get out from underneath. Many people get this chemical from exercise. Think of the runner's high, from performing manual labor, or even from laughing. Thinking back to the beginning of the human species, we can definitely see how this body chemical would help us to continue hunting that gazelle or continue searching for those fruits and berries and to construct shelter, for example. Moving on to dopamine, this chemical provides that instant gratification and is meant to be short-lasting. It's highly addictive, which motivates us to behave in such a way that provides us that gratifying feeling. Thinking of our hunting for this gazelle, once the animal is captured and killed, that feeling of accomplishment overflows. Fast forward to today, we can see it manifest in harmful behaviors because the chemical is highly addictive. Who doesn't want that feeling overflowing all the time? But there are substances and behaviors that hijack that dopamine reward system, like for example, alcohol, gambling, or even social media. When you check social media today, you want to see who liked your post or who responded to your post or who text messaged you back or even who had emailed you back. Um, we want to constantly check our phones to see if there's been an update somewhere in our social media lives. And that gives us that little hit of dopamine every time. Now let's transition to the selfless chemicals. They motivate us to cooperate and to develop trust, loyalty, and camaraderie. They promote pro-social behaviors. Two chemicals specifically here mentioned are serotonin and oxytocin. Serotonin is our leadership chemical. Think of that feeling of pride and confidence. It is also responsible in our sense of accountability to others. Oxytocin is our chemical of love. Think of that of the warm and fuzzies. This chemical is long lasting and is responsible for our ability to create those friendships and long-term relationships that are so vital for our personal and professional lives. It has helped the human species cooperate in such a way that we've been able to not just tackle that gazelle, but survive, but thrive and become the civilization we are today. And lastly, let's talk about the stress chemical, cortisol. We hear so much about this chemical in the news today. Cortisol is actually meant to turn off non-essential functions for the flight or fight response. It's supposed to be short acting as it actually stops the release of oxytocin, that love pro-social chemical, and compromises our immune system. When we go to tackle that gazelle, we want to amp up our aggression and turn our body systems to the essential functions in order to survive. However, today it is responsible for the stress and anxiety and discomfort that we often feel, especially in non-functional organizations. Simon Sinek recalls these body chemicals throughout the book to connect his vignettes of functional and non-functional organizations to help us identify how our brains and bodies are still wired very much the same when we were in survival mode in the beginning of our species and how that plays out in today's world. Thank you for your time. And next we go to The Art of Listening with Antwoine Land.
Antwoine Land coming to you live. Today's topic is employees are people too. Bob Chapman took over a Southern company here in South Carolina, Hazen, Sinclair. Before Chapman took over this operation, like typical factory structures, the bell would ring for employees to take breaks and lunch. But things changed when Chapman came to the organization. He didn't bring any consultants in to restructure the strategy. His approach was different, which is simple technique of the art of listening, sitting down, listening to employees' concerns. Ron Campbell, a 27-year-old vet with the company, was hesitant to express his concerns. The first issue he wanted to know from Chapman, if he expressed his concerns, if he would have a job, because personnel was in the office sitting there listening also. Chapman assured him that he would have a job tomorrow. So Campbell told Chapman that one thing that he had concerns about was the actual clock tracking their every move. Campbell also brought up the fact that engineers and accountants seem to be treated differently from the other employees in the plant. So the benefits of Chapman taking over and implementing his changes, the empathy and trust were immediately injected into the culture. He looked at everyone as a human, not a factory, office, or employee. He created an environment that everyone is treated the same. Chapman changed the way employees retrieve spare parts. They didn't have to stand in line waiting for someone to give it to them. They can go at their own leisure. Chapman removed all locks and fences from the parts supply facility. He took out all pay phones and had company phones for all employees to have access to use as needed. No coins of permission were required. Chapman believed in the fundamental goodness in people, whether they were college graduates or had a GED. He treated everyone the same. The company began to feel more like a family. Employees started to care about each other. By making minor changes, the revenue increased from 55 million from one year to 95 million the next. That's over a 40 million increase by implementing the simple changes. This topic is leading millennials. Millennials have a unique personality characteristics that are challenging for employers. Managers are looking for guidance on how to manage them. In some cases, just asking them what they want. Work schedule flexibility, meals, laundry services. It's still hard to satisfy them even when you give them what they want. Executives struggle to inspire and engage loyalty from these millennials. Job satisfaction and fulfillment, the crave is difficult to maintain. There is not anything wrong with millennials, which they grew up in a way that is different from older generations, which is better in many ways. They are more inclusive and more accepting of people who are different from them. For example, sexuality and gender identity. Have a heightened desire to move, have a heightened desire that money and capitalism be used for good, more drawn to companies that give profits or resources to others less fortunate. They have a desire to make an impact on the company, to have a sense of purpose, cause, and belief. Millennials have more courage to leave a job they don't like and quicker than older generations. They embrace entrepreneurship paths more readily and demand companies that work to give them more of what they need. Companies must adjust their strategy to keep up with the times. Millennials struggle with self-esteem issues. Many are addicted to their phones and social media devices, which they have struggles with meaningful relationships. Mentor and support them. Lead by example.
And our next topic is about meaningful relationships. Here you'll see an interview on the Today Show between Hoda Kotb and Dr. Toya Rollins.
Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Rollins. In your research on leadership, you referenced someone. Please tell us who that is.
Thank you again for having me, Hoda. Yes, I reference Robin Dunbar, a British anthropologist and professor of experimental psychology at Oxford University. He presented the Dunbar rule, and this supports the idea that you cannot have meaningful relationships with groups of more than 150 people. Now, you may say, I'm not sure I'm buying that. I've got thousands of friends on Facebook, right? I bet you do, Hoda. But are they really friends? More food for thought? Homo sapiens lived in hunter-gatherer groups, which ranged in number from 100 to 150 people. The Bushmen of South Africa and Native Americans also lived in groups of 100 to 150 people. A company of Marine Corps men or women, 150. That's the magic number.
Interesting. How has this principle been applied to organizations?
Numbers of people aren't people, Hoda. They're numbers. Let's think about that. This is often a blind spot for leaders, not recognizing the human factor behind the numbers. So, an example, Bill Gore, a gentleman who left DuPont to start a company focused on Teflon manufacturing. The business grew, and it got to a point where he didn't realize things had changed. He walked out on the plant floor and didn't know everybody that he thought he knew. He went back to his office and thought about it and recognized he needed to make a change, which meant he needed to come up with a number of people, that magic number that he knew would be able to produce, work together, develop strong relationships, and deliver what's needed for the organization. So he implemented a rule that said each of his plants or locations only had 150 people. And it continues today.
You were a graduate student at Forest Graduate School. Does this tie into any of the teachings?
Yes, actually it does. A leader that has either applied this principle or is considering it has to be engaged with their frontline team. So that ties into empathy, but also needs to have a long-term vision or strategic vision to know that this type of change to his or her business is going to have a direct input on the overall performance of the business. So again, strategic vision would be the skill set that I would say from Lake Forest leadership model that this would apply to.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Rollins.
Yes, thank you, Hoda.
Now let's move on to talk about courage and trust.
Southwest 1458, you can expect an extended downwind. We have another fellow company airplane coming in that has an emergency that's pretty serious, so we're going to dump him in front of you.
No problem. We're running early, so do what you got to do. 1458.
Hey, join Erie there, maintain 170 knots, please. I'm going to slow you down.
Okay, Erie, 170 on the speed, Southwest 1458.
Southwest 1380, you'll be landing 27 left today. And you just let me know when you need to turn base. Right now, I only have one person in front of you, which is a Southwest. I'm sure he'll pull off if you need to go right in. Southwest 1380. I understand your emergency. Let me know when you want to go in.
Yeah, we have a part of the aircraft missing, so we're going to need to slow down a bit.
Southwest 1380. Speed is your discretion. Maintain at any altitude above 3,000 feet, and you let me know when you want to turn base.
A Florida-bound flight was somewhere over Maryland when it couldn't maintain altitude and needed to descend immediately. However, another flight was directly below the troubled aircraft, and per FAA rules, no two aircraft en route can pass each other closer than 1,000 feet or 5 miles around each other. Furthermore, to complicate matters, and military exercises were being conducted, and so airspace was restricted in that area. Fortunately enough, they had an experienced air traffic controller on board who was aware of all aircraft in the area and knew all the rules and restrictions. On that clear day over Maryland, 126 souls on that plane were saved because of one very experienced air traffic controller and that decided to break the rules. Keeping people alive was more important than maintaining boundaries. And that's what trust is. We don't just trust people to obey the rules and that's it. We also trust them to know when to break them. Trust is a very special human experience produced by the chemical oxytocin, as mentioned before, in response to acts performed on our behalf that serve our safety and our protection. True trust can only exist among people. And we can only trust others when we know they are actively and consciously concerned about us. The technology, no matter how sophisticated, how comprehensive, how detailed, doesn't really care about us at all. It simply reacts to a set of variables programmed into it. And the rulebook, no matter how comprehensive, like before, cannot consider that of every eventuality. The true social benefit of trust must be reciprocal. Thank you.